A lot of stuff. The slaves have been slaves in Egypt for nearly 400 years. So it's not just something that suddenly changed overnight. And so God had chosen Moses to do something about it. And like many of us would be, he was scared initially. He thought, no, don't send me, send my brother, send somebody else. But eventually Moses agreed to do what God promised he would support him in doing. And he went to Pharaoh and said, let the people go. It's not fair that these people are slaves. They're going through a tough enough time and you're making it worse. And Pharaoh didn't care. He says Pharaoh hardened his heart. Pharaoh said, no, I'm not doing it. You can't make me. And so they went off and they prayed about it. They tried something. And God kept sending Moses back and said, do this. Try this. And they did all these different things happen as we've talked about over the last few weeks. And then it reached the point where he said to say to Moses, go and tell him all of this stuff's going to happen. There's going to be these plagues. And we're going to look at the plagues in a minute. And I just want you to imagine what it must have felt like. Not for Pharaoh, because Pharaoh thought he was better than everything. But for everybody else. For the slaves, because they weren't going to be kind of ignored by the plagues. What about the warriors, the army? They were all going to suffer. The only one that thought they wouldn't suffer was Pharaoh. And then one after one the plagues came. And that would, which one of the plagues would you have gone, yeah, all right, God, yeah, you're going to win anyway. I'll let the slaves go. Because they're all pretty hideous. Let's see if we can get the 10. I'm going to look to Daniel first, because Daniel probably got them all in the right order as well. Go on, Daniel, which one are you going to go for? Blood was first. In what form? What happened?
The Red River. Turned all the water.
Yeah, the Nile was turned into blood, yeah. Anybody want to go for one? It could be you against Terry. It could be like table tennis.
I don't know.
No, normally, but Daniel will.
That's all right.
Do you want to go for one, Terry?
Is it frog next?
Frogs? I can't remember. Don't know.
Yes,
Daniel,
frogs.
no.
Yeah,
Frogs.
Yeah.
Frogs.
The water turns to blood, so they come out.
Yeah.
Frogs. Right. Anybody else? You, Diane, you got it?
Lice and gnats.
Lice and gnats. Thank you. Back to Daniel.
Fourth one was.
Doesn't have to be in order. It's fine.
Boils.
Boils. There we go. Got boils. It's like an auction. Got boils in the front.
Darkness.
Darkness.
Hail.
Hail.
Does it have to be in order?
No.
Go on, you give one.
Got another one from the back.
Disease, livestock.
Brilliant. That's a good one. How are we doing?
Locust.
Locust.
Death of firstborn.
Death of firstborn was the last one. I think that's all of them, isn't it?
That's all it's
Yeah. Well done, everybody. Give yourselves a clap. It was better than that. But can you imagine being in that situation where, I don't know if you've ever been on a holiday where there's lots of like flies, or if you've gone to Scotland, there's lots of gnats about, and it's horrible. But imagine that kind of 100 times worse. Or imagine a plague of locusts coming across the land and eating anything you've grown that you plan to eat will have gone. Or what about if all of your livestock become diseased? They're the ones you're going to eat. They're the ones you're going to use to get milk. They're the ones you're going to use to get eggs, and all of the things you're going to need to do to breed more livestock. All of those things have now got disease. So they're massively affecting your life. But Pharaoh, with all money and all power, still doesn't care. So I wonder whether, as these plagues went on, more and more of the slaves, more and more of the warriors actually were beginning to think, actually this God has got a point, and maybe we need to listen to Moses. And then it reached the point where the last one, what was mentioned at the back, the death of the firstborn child in each household, that would have been devastating, even to Pharaoh, because Pharaoh wasn't oblivious. It was only people that had managed to put blood around the doorway to stop the spirit going past. That's what he's fallen over then, did. Even Pharaoh's firstborn child was killed. And it was just at that point that Pharaoh said, yeah, okay, you win. Let the people go. Let the slaves go. After 400 years of slavery, they can go. And Moses led them out of Egypt into the desert land, and they were in for a tough time, but they must have felt so excited because the first time ever in their lives, but also in their ancestors' lives, they were free. So So Moses led them away. Moses led them away as quick as he could. He was listening to. It's not at all distracting, is it? Listening to God for direction, and slowly they all followed Moses away and away and away. And then they reached that point where they were following a cloud during the day and a pillar of fire at night. So they knew God was directing them where they'd got to go. And then they reached the point where they hit the sea. And as it was described there, it was a proper sea. It wasn't just a stream, it wasn't a river, it was a full-on sea. And the chances are probably most of them couldn't swim. And now they think, actually, what's going to happen? How are we going to get across? God must have sent us on the wrong track. This is all Moses' fault. And the person that had helped them for all of that time, they then started to turn on and blame Moses for things that were going wrong. And at the same time, back where they started, the Pharaoh has changed his mind. He said, hang on a minute, who's going to do all the work? Who are we going to get to build all the buildings? Who are we going to get to do all the work that we don't want to do? Actually, we need those slaves back. And he sends his warriors to chase after them. Chances were all of the slaves would have been on foot, and the warriors were all on chariots or on horses. So they were caught up relatively quickly. And now they've got a sea at the front, and warriors that want to catch them and drag them back behind. And so they blamed Moses. They said, what have you done to us? You brought us out of Egypt. It would be better for us to be slaves in Egypt than to die here in the desert. They all thought they would drown. And then Moses answered, he said, do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see God deliver you today. The Egyptians you will see today, so the people who are chasing them, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. So have you ever been that scared? You ever been that scared when you feel like your back's against the wall and what's in front of you is not much better? It must be terrifying. Yeah, but I did look at you earlier, Daniel, and thought, you're a perfect example. And you look like Moses as well. It's the dress that is. But it must have been absolutely terrible. If you think, anybody that's been around for the last few weeks, would have heard Sarah tell a story a while ago, that well-known story about the man whose house is in a flood, and as the flood gets higher, there's a paddle boat arrives and offers to save him. And he said, no, God's going to save me, it's fine. And the flood goes higher, and a speedboat arrives, and he said, no, God's going to save me, it's fine. And eventually he's on the roof, and a helicopter comes. He says, no, it's fine, God's going to save me. And then the man drowns. And in heaven he says to God, why didn't you save me? He said, I did. I sent you a rowboat, I sent you a speedboat, and I sent you a helicopter. God had provided so much help for these people. Not only did he send them Moses, but he also sent them all these different ways to get the Pharaoh to change his heart. And this was their option. And at the first chance of things going a little bit tough, they turned their back on Moses and wanted to blame God. And then the most amazing thing happened. Can you imagine being in the sea, standing next to the sea? You know, we've all probably been to the seaside where you see the waves come and go. And, you know, you kind of, as little children, they might step towards the waves, and as they come, you run away again. Imagine that situation where the sea parts. And it's kind of slowly getting further and further apart so you can walk through. And therefore the water's going to be getting higher and higher either side of you. Imagine what you could see. Were there fish? Were there sharks? Were there creatures in the water? So you could see them as you've now been invited to walk through. Would you do it? Would you walk through? I don't even like going to an aquarium where you have to walk through one of those tubes. And I know the glass is stronger than, the shark trying to kill me. But actually, would I be brave enough to walk through that? I don't know. But Moses trusted God enough to do the ridiculous things that God asked him to do. God asked him to raise his hand and raise his staff and trust him that God would do the rest. And the sea parted, and then he said, come on guys, follow me. I don't know what I do. But thankfully they did. And they followed him. They listened to what he said. That later today, the Egyptians you see now, in other words, the one chasing them, you'll never see again. And as they walked through the sea to the other side, and the Egyptians were chasing them, probably getting closer and closer and closer. And as the last slave stepped onto the ground, away from the sea came crashing down and took out all of the Egyptians. So God will deliver us, even through tough times. Maybe not in the way we want Him to. It's not always obvious. Sometimes we do have that Red Sea moment and have to do something totally out of character, maybe something we don't want to do. We have to take a risk for God, and God will always be there for you. So I think we're going to have another song. We're going to have another song, probably. It's your choice.